It's a work of a great writer. The Alwist is the one who tells us the Joseph story and other stories that we never forget. And he's just a great, great writer, but he, as many great writers, not interested in it. It makes sense always. You follow that? And he can say things so fast in a few sketches, which takes these other writers a long time. They're very wordy by comparison. Look, the first narration account is nice. We like it. It's poetic, but it's very wordy. This guy does what the first guy does in about 2 sentences, right? The other guy takes about 40 lines to say what the second guy is saying in 2 sentences. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? So he can just go, it's like an artist to go, the other guy's working away. So there's just 2 different styles. You can see it even in the English. Now, no one did this earlier because you weren't allowed to do this in the Bible. You'd get crucified, burned. If you did this in Galileo's time, they'd have you out there with a stick of wood burning you up. No, you know, and that's the problem in the Muslim world today. Muslims are good people, but they're afraid to speak because they know some fanatic will cut their throat. What are you going to do when there's someone out there who thinks they have the right to cut your throat? It's frightening. That's why people say the Americans, when they went into Iraq, they probably were doing it for decent, noble reasons. They didn't go in with enough forces to keep the order, and now the murderers, crazies, lunatics are in control of part of Iraq. Now, we don't get enough credit for the fact they're not in control in the north and they're not in control in the south. But nobody pays. The journalists just love to beat up on this country, love to show everything wrong with this country and nothing right. And the fact that 2/3 of Iraq is pacified, they don't even mention. You know, and so they are doing a good job in the north and the south, but that is one area of where all these crazies are in control, and they don't have sufficient troops, and they don't want to get Americans killed to put it down. So, you know, you don't put enough people on the ground to control the people who are cutting people's throats. Same thing in New Orleans. They didn't put the security forces in quick enough to stop people from being intimidated, and therefore a lot of people died because they were afraid to do this, that, or the other thing, and the supplies didn't go, and everything fell down because of lack of security. So, you know, this is something that's very difficult. I don't blame anyone for it. You've got to be a genius to foresee everything in advance. But, you know, the Americans didn't understand that you needed security. Now, in these areas where there's no security, people's throats get cut. And that means that people are frightened. And so when people are frightened, they're not going to use their brains. They're just going to go by their fear. So the Muslims, I'm sure, would feel and behave differently if someone was protecting them, but since nobody is, the best policy is to shut your mouth. But we have it in our gang-dominated areas in our cities. If you're in a gang-dominated area in the city, what do? You're going to oppose the gang? You're going to open your mouth? No, but you're going to get killed. So you shut up. It happens everywhere. Intimidation is, as long as you are willing to kill people, you can intimidate them. Okay, so the reason we didn't say these things before is because we didn't have civil authorities who were protecting us. And that only happened after, you know, the separation of church and state, rights of man and women, Declaration of Independence, things of that kind, where people knew that they could speak without being retribution occurring, and therefore they could study it. So don't ask, how come they didn't say it earlier? They didn't say it earlier because they were afraid to. And no one dared say anything because that person would be singled out and dealt with. Okay. So we've only had 200 or 300 years that we could say these things. And so we've done pretty good for 200 or 300 years, honestly. I don't think we've done that badly, given that it's only been going on for 200 years or so. The ability to speak in an open way. And even there's some question today whether you can speak totally open without getting into some problems. In any event, the Alwist is a very great writer, and the Alwist is not so interested that everything makes sense. Let's go back to the first creations. We've learned a lot already. We didn't get it from books, we get it from looking at the text. See, now you don't have text in front of you, you don't have a text in front of you, so what we're saying sounds like gobbledygook. You have to have a text right in front of you so you can see what we're talking about for it to make any sense to you. Otherwise, it just sounds like people raving in the wind. So I really do, I don't care, you do what you want, but I really do not just, I don't insist, I can't insist, I recommend. Get a text, bring it in, a text that's cheap. Go to a used bookstore even, buy one that's just scrap paper, cheaper than you can Xerox one. Mark it all up. Mark these papers. Someone said, can you mark up a Bible? When I first started doing this stuff, I said, oh, I can't mark a Bible, it's holy. It's holy. You know, but the Xerox machine, the printing press was made to reproduce things cheaply. So I don't think you should mark up the family Bible that you're going to use for ceremonial purposes in your household if you do any ceremony of any kind. But I do think you could get a scrap Bible that you can do whatever you want, particularly if it's already used and someone else has marked it up. So that's not going to be holy after that. So you go to a used bookstore, get one, and mark it up. You know, you see a word that, like, it was good, circle it. So you don't forget, there it is, right there. You see, now this begins on 2:5. Mark it. How are you going to know where it begins? How are you going to find it? You're going to look in your notes, where was that? What number was it? You know, this is what I mean. You've got to have a study Bible. And why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? Look at my Bible. It's falling apart. I got all my notes in it. Like, you see my New Testament here. I've given up, you know. Look at Galatians. I don't want to forget what I saw. I have to think of it all over again. What's the point? You know, 10 years from now, I won't remember what I saw. So I mark it up so I can remember, you know. I don't consider this a holy Bible I'm working on. This is a piece of scrap paper that I got, you know, I ruined it now. It's falling apart. The first page is falling apart. Okay, let's look at the rest of the first account. So, fourth day we're in. God said, let there be lights in the vault of heaven to divide the day from the night, and have festivals, days, and years, the religious festivals God's already putting in there. Let the lights in the vault of heaven shine on earth. See, there's a priestly element that you wouldn't think a normal person would be interested in. Festivals. That's something I would mark, you see. That there's an interesting point. That shows a priestly bent there. Wouldn't put that in the Yahwist account. He wouldn't be having Adam and Eve in the garden and suddenly saying, God made festivals, you know. He wouldn't do it. He's just a different kind of writer. But again, here's the repetition. God made the two great lights, sun and the moon, meaning the greater one to govern the day, the smaller one to govern the night, and